Dear friends, it's an honor for me that I can invite now President of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, to take a floor and to have a speech to us and about his vision, Ukrainian vision of the future of Europe and the world. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished President Paris, dear friends, I'm glad to welcome all of you in Ukrainian land. The Yalta meeting is the 8th meeting of the leading world experts and politicians, representatives of business and science. It's a meeting of those whose ideas and decisions have significant influence upon our life. The global crisis has posed a number of serious challenges, and the answer to these challenges can only be given jointly. The first such challenge is whether the modern market economy capable, based on the liberal freedoms, capable of enduring this crisis. In particular, we mean here the uh, influential and powerful world centers like the European Union and the United States of America, but we also speak about the young market economies that undergo the process of post-socialist transformation. Whether there is, as it has already happened earlier, and it happened in the 20th century, the detrimental wish to new social experiments on the nations and countries. The other challenge is how effectively and transparently can cooperate our institutions and provide the international coordination. How capable are G20, the national authorities, and the European Union and the other regional organizations capable. And the most important thing is how well our national democratic procedures will coordinate and will correspond to the international level and decision making that will have the impact upon the sovereignty of the other countries. It is not a secret that the international regimes of security are now undergoing the stress test, so to say. And these regimes have been in place for dozens of years. So it is obvious that we need to strengthen the influence of such security institutions and organizations as the United Nations and OSCE. It is obvious that the bloc type decision making by the blocs of the countries is belongs to the past. So objectively, we feel the growing need for the multilateral decision making to resolve the problems of our time. We need to modernize the system of consultations and agreements at the international level. The leading role in this agenda belong to both the issues and problems that I have already mentioned, and also the issues of energy and raw material supplies security. The fourth issue that I would like to mention is that the crisis, financial and economic crisis, has put on display the dynamics of the leveling of the different ways of development of different countries and even the regions of the world. This made more acute international competition even the attempts to restrain the development. The resources wars, as we call them, the restrictions in access to the investments and modern technologies, political lobbyism of the purely commercial interests, all that influences and made its impact on the successful national policies of different countries that are trying to modernize their societies by making reforms. Whether our efforts will be supported not in words but in deed too, whether the East and the West will agree to the emergence of the new player in the very center of Eurasia. I count on the frank and candid discussion of this complicated issue. The cardinal changes in the balance of power between different world centers require real review and rethinking of the prospects of the development of Ukraine and its place in the world. Ukraine, in modern conditions, positions itself as a modern European country that has specific interests and the possibilities to gain its dignified place in the world. We have all the conditions to make our country a regional leader in Eastern Europe. But this aim can only be achieved thanks to the successful modernization of our country and the deepening of cooperation with our strategic partners. The movement towards that aim should be bilateral. And I hope that at this event we'll hear the new and interesting and useful ideas that would enable us to look anew at the development of political and economic processes, to better acknowledge the situation and understand the situation in our country and in the region, better understand the prospects of our development. I wish to all the participants every success. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'm going to be your moderator for these next 2 days. And it's been great to hear from the Ukrainian president to begin with. Now we're going to have a chance to ask him questions for about 25 minutes, and then we will hear from President Perez. I am going to take the moderator's privilege of asking President Yanukovych the first question. Panie Prezydencie,
Mr. President, you've been talking about Ukraine as a state which is facing great issues and which sees itself as modern democratic European state. We heard from Stefan Füle from European Union that Ukraine is at a crossroads. It has to choose where it is, whether it participates in the free trade area of with the European Union or does it join the customs union. How do you see this choice for Ukraine? Mr. Füle, as nobody else, knows today and can give an assessment of reforms which take place in Ukraine and the progress which Ukraine chose as a strategic one in the form of the law on the principles of domestic and foreign policy last year. This is the law of Ukraine, which determines European integration and
the outside vector, so to say, the principle of national pragmatism is the basis, is the foundation of our aspirations. Therefore, in our agenda, in the agenda for Ukraine, we have such issues as the free trade area agreement with the European Union, the association agreement, and also the implementation of the plan of actions for visa-free exchanges, human exchanges that we have received earlier this year. The issue of the customs union is not in this agenda. I have already said about that publicly, and I would like to repeat it once again. We have made our decision. We have our legislation, we have our constitution that we abide by and that we are going to abide by irrevocably.
Mario David, who is a member of the Yes board and a European MEP, please. Can we hear? Yeah. Mario, why don't we take?
Mr. President, first of all, of course, it's a pleasure to be here. President Kwasniewski has already mentioned what is the goal, what is the reason that, as far as I'm concerned, I'm coming to Yalta for the 7th time, and I've been in your country more than 20 times. But I have to tell you, as EPP Vice President, that I never came here with such a broken heart as I do this time, because we have the feeling in the European Union that Ukraine is diverting from the path that we thought that you were going to follow and that we were dreaming of, which was a closer integration with the European Union. And in particular, in the case of my dearest friend, Yulia Tymoshenko, we have the feeling that there is an enormous political motivation, not only in her case, but it also in some cases of some friends and some members of her government. And allow me to be so frank, but friends have to look into the eyes of friends and address the direct questions. So I would like to ask you a comment on that and let you know that we are very sorry that we look at Ukraine in these conditions. Thank you.
Це питання для нас також дуже болюче. Це питання, і ми розділяємо з вами цю біль. Більш того, я хочу сказати, що ми задоволені тим, що це вас також хвилює, як ви кажете, не менше, ніж нас. Ми цінуємо ті поради, які нам
We appreciate the advice we receive, and on this issue too. But this issue has a lot of different sides and aspects to it. And the history, or rather the story, that today we are witnessing is not a today's story. This story dates back to 2009, and this is the story of signing of the contract by the companies, economic entities that abused, exceeded their authority, the authority vested in them, and thus violated the law. The former president, Mr. Yushchenko, signed an executive order upon the decision of the Security and Defense Council decision to investigate this matter. And so the investigation started when the law enforcement agencies of the country received the order based upon the decision of the Security and Defense Council of Ukraine. And they started investigating the whys of why the interests of Ukraine were violated and the international agreements signed by it were breached. The continuation of that story was when the law enforcement bodies forwarded to the court of law the materials that resulted from that investigation, and as in any other country of the world and Europe, the court of law started deliberating on that. There is a problem of the legislation that we have in Ukraine. It needs to be modernized, and we are working on that. Yet a year ago, we started reviewing the Code of Criminal Procedure that is now undergoing the expert examination and review by the Venice Commission. The aim is to upgrade Ukrainian legislation to the European standards, to make equal the prosecution and the defense in the court trials, and so on. And I hope that later this year, by the end of this year, we'll have the conclusions of the Venice Commission that I hope will be positive. So these are the things that Ukraine is pursuing now, is doing now, and these are the reforms that undoubtedly will lead to significant improvement of many aspects of our life, including the legal standards and democratic standards, because, for example, the criminal code of Ukraine dates back to 1962, and although it has already been amended, but we still think that it's nonsense. It's nonsensical to live by the document that old. Regrettably, Ukrainian politicians did not manage to review that document. And so we view our tasks and our goals to review and redo, remake.
Like the President, Mario, I'm thankful to you also for that question. I think it was on everyone's mind. Дякую дуже, пане президенте, за відповідь. I think Anders Asland, who is a longtime friend of mine and friend and student of Ukraine, has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I normally ask you about economic reforms. This year you have started a big pension reform, and the big problem that remains, that you have problems now with both the European Union and the IMF, it's gas reform. You are doing a reorganization, but the fundamental issue is Ukraine needs to sharply reduce its consumption of gas, and still Ukraine persists in subsidizing far too expensive imported Russian gas. What do you intend to do about this? Thank you.
Year by year, Ukraine introduces new energy-saving technologies, modernizes and reforms its industrial sector. And the program that we have already started implementing envisages the reduction of consumption of the imported natural gas by approximately 5 million cubic meters annually. Today, our country consumes around 33 billion cubic meters of natural gas annually. Recently, the former President Kuchma, who is today with us, is present here, worked, and I worked together with him on these on that problem. At that time, the level of consumption amounted to approximately 50 billion cubic meters, even slightly more than 50 billion. Today, it's already 33. For the next year, we submitted our order to the Russian Gazprom Corporation to import around 27 billion cubic meters. At the same time, we increase the extraction of our own natural gas here in Ukraine. And its production can be at about 21 billion cubic meters. Already all the utilities, all the needs of all the local utilities are covered by locally produced, locally extracted natural gas. And rest assured that the natural gas production in Ukraine is not is quite profitable. Today, the major problem that we have is to make the level of price of the natural gas that we purchase, that we import, the same as the average level price for the other European countries. As we are trying to upgrade our social standards to those of Europe, like, for example, the increase of pensions, salaries, we gradually be able to pay higher prices if it price for the gas if it grows. But today we are involved in this discussion that is a matter of principle for Ukraine, for its international image even, and standing. The purchase price of the imported gas. So we are now engaged in a dialogue with the participation of a number of leading consulting companies, foreign consulting companies, and I thank you, Mr. Orsland, that in your capacity of an international expert, you also participate frequently in similar discussions. We have already signed the Energy Charter with the European Union that, among other things, provides for the restructuring of the Naftogaz of Ukraine and its separation of this bulky structure, bulky organization in a number of smaller entities that need to be registered, the IPO for which should be done, and the expenses of which should be reduced, that those expenses that are now such a heavy burden for Naftogaz of Ukraine. We are also looking for the creditors with whom we will try to find some joint common decision. We treat them with respect as we treat with respect all other partners, and we abide by all the commitments that we have with them. And certainly this is an important issue. That is the issue that is in the province of national security of the country, I dare say.
Next, I think, yeah, microphone. Thomas? I think Sasha had a question, another long-standing student of Ukrainian and Russian affairs.
Виктор Федорович, здравствуйте. Спасибо.
For participating in this forum. My question is quite traditional. You almost gave an answer to it. Mr. Putin yesterday scared everyone to death, saying that at present a Nord Stream started to pump the gas and it's going to bypass Ukraine, and other people are talking about building the Southern Stream,
То есть ваша транзитная роль, как транзитное государство, где-то становится под вопросом. Я думаю, единственный выход, как вы уже сказали, быстрее и быстрее создавать международный консорциум с участием иностранных компаний. В этом отношении будет где-то сближение с Европейским Союзом и усиление, значит, инвестиций Запада в эту структуру.
As one of my very close friends used to say, the shells are exploding closer and closer, or keep exploding closer and closer to me. Yes, indeed, we are in the situation when we need to make right decisions and right on time. But yet in 2004, the government of Ukraine that I headed at that time, together with the President Kuchma, the then President Kuchma, we made a decision to establish an international consortium. Regrettably, that decision was not implemented because the leadership of the country changed, and today we offer to our partners in Europe and in Russia this solution of modernizing the transit of gas across our territory. And for example, the southern pipeline could be laid across the southern part, or rather, the pipelines of the southern part of Ukraine should be used. And the capacity of the construction of the new pipeline is now, estimated now at 25 billion euros. What we offer is much cheaper solution, much less expensive. Therefore, the dialogue that we have now between Ukraine and Russia at the level of the corporations of Naftogaz and Gazprom This is a natural process, and we feel no extra emotions, so to say, with that regard. We remain strategic partners with Russia, and the agenda of our relations is much wider than that issue alone, and so we are going to cooperate, and one should expect no sensations. Some hotheads, so to say, they make different forecasts, but our attitude is very stable. We have our national interests. We are going to uphold and defend them, protect them. And our approach is to construct our relations with all our partners at the high level and to uphold the interests of both parts. Therefore, I'm sure that the proper solution will be found, and the issue of modernization of Ukrainian gas pipelines is in our agenda. It remains among the most topical for us, and I'm sure that proper solution will be found timely, taking into account certainly the interests of Russia, which is a strategic supply of energy resources to Europe and European countries, but Ukraine as a transit country is also interested to find its proper place, and in this respect we are ready to offer very civilized and very profitable, lucrative approach that has good prospects for implementation.
I'm disappointed to hear from President Yanukovych there will be no sensations in the Ukrainian gas situation. But I am pleased to note that history suggests otherwise, and it's always been a good story for me. So we're running out of time, but I'd like to have my friend Natalka Yuresko ask a question. She's one of the leading businesswomen in Ukraine, and I think we'd all like to hear the voice of Ukrainian investors.
Well, unfortunately, I have to give the question that's also been given many times before. Mr. President, given the ongoing and deepening global economic crisis, investment dollars are becoming more risk-averse. And the competition for these investment dollars is becoming more and more fierce. At the same time, in that context, Ukraine's reputation for its investment environment is, well, let's say, less than favorable. What can you do? What do you plan to do? What steps can you take to improve Ukraine's position on that scale and move Ukraine to the top of the class, to be the best place to invest?
Thank you for this very important question, on which we have been working diligently, and our efforts have been appreciated by the Fitch rating agency, and which upgraded our investment rating. It was upgraded from the stable to positive. But we are also looking into the future, and therefore the whole series of actions is envisaged in order to make Ukraine more attractive for the investments, to create the better conditions for the businesses that operate in Ukraine. We now implement the regulatory reform. Deregulation of many aspects of business activity is being done now, and a lot of obstacles for business operations in Ukraine are being removed. The high level of corruption is also a problem upon which we work, and we enacted the new anti-corruption legislation, that went into effect starting this last July. We also pursue the administrative reform that is supposed to also significantly improve the investment climate in Ukraine. A number of other aspects of public policy, of the policy of public authority is going to be reformed. We gradually are going to reduce the VAT, value-added tax. We have clear-cut plans structured and year by year, and we are going to abide by these laws and new regulations that have already started producing their positive effects. And these are the laws that have not been adopted and enacted for the last 20 years. Therefore, the reforms that we are implementing in our country is the core of the policy of its current leadership, and it's a result of a coordinated work of all the branches of public authorities of our country. By the end of the year, we are planning to implement reforms in 21 sectors of our public policy and spheres of public life. On the time scale, the reforms are structured so that they are interrelated and they produce synergetic positive effect in different walks of life and in different sectors. We have increased the industrial development of the country. The GDP grew last year by more than 4%. This year we hope to have more than 5% growth. In agricultural sector, we have had almost 9 percentage points growth. This year we have already harvested 11 million tons more of cereals than last year. That is certainly not to say that we do not understand that we cannot stop. Only the implementation and the finalization, completeness of reform can produce positive results, because the patchy attitude in this respect is counterproductive. We understand that the previous years in the history of our country have been very contradictory. There was no systemic approach to the reforms in the country, and the result of this patchy approach was that in 2009, Ukraine suffered larger reduction of GDP than any other country, by 15%. We perfectly well acknowledge all this and understand all this. So today we are doing our best in order to get ready for any possible new crisis that is also possible, in order to reduce the outer influences, the influences from outside of the country upon Ukraine and its economy, be minimized, and the growth rate that we have today in our country be protected and upheld in the nearest future.
Judging by Natalka's expression, I think she's still reserving judgment, but I'm sure that she's happy to hear, as we all are, that you're optimistic in your efforts. Я думаю, що ми мусимо зупинитися на тому.
We should probably stop by saying that.
And I think we would all agree with Viktor that President Shimon Peres is certainly the wisest tiger around. And it's a real honor for us, I think, now to hear some remarks from him. Please, President Peres.
President of Ukraine, President Kuchma, President Wisniewski, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Coming to Yalta, one must remember immediately a great author that has influenced our life when we were children and still is influencing the life of our children, Anton Chekhov. I thought that the real great dramaturgs of our time were Shakespeare and Chekhov. They didn't write musicals like in Hollywood. There wasn't happy end to their stories. They had different approaches. Anton Chekhov was raising a voice against poverty, discrimination, poor people. Shakespeare was raising a voice for justice, for freedom. Their stories were totally different. With Shakespeare, you have had heroes on the stage, fighting in a very dramatic way, and finally, by the end of the drama, all the heroes were lying on the stage, totally dead, with the spirit of justice flying over them. With Chekhov, no heroes, unhappy people, plain people. Everybody is angry, frustrated, full of complaints. Nothing is happening happily. But by the end of the drama, everybody is tired and disappointed, but alive. So, as a politician, I prefer the approach of Chekhov than the approach of Shakespeare. With all due respect, we have to fight the daily demands, the poverties, the injustice, the discrimination. And if somebody thinks that life stands still, I think he's totally wrong. Recently, an important journalist tried to explain what's happening in our time, and he says, until now, we have had 192, today 193 states. Every state was like a ship with its own flag, its own captain, its own plan of traveling, of sailing. Today, there is no more, and the task of strategy and diplomacy was to prevent crashes among the ships. So we shall remain alive. Today, all of us are sailing just on one ship with 193 cabins. Instead of being a ship, a nation became a cabin. And what's happening to the ship affects every cabin, and what's happening in every cabin affects the ship. If somebody in the cabin, for example, will begin to play with nuclear bombs, the ship is in danger. If the ship will go to a strange destination, we don't know. Now the global ship doesn't have a captain, doesn't have a flag. We don't know the voyage, where it goes. It affects each of us in the cabin, but none of us can affect the ship, including the major countries like the United States of America. So we feel like being in a ship with certain capriciousness, and we don't know really how to navigate, how to behave, how to go out. Looking at the old economy is no solution, because the old economy was based on accumulation, and things, the wealth that we accumulated. And the great economists tried to analyze what makes you rich, what makes you happy. But this was analyzing the past. There is no more any economist that can analyze a thing that doesn't happen, namely the future. Now, the economy does not hang upon what we have, but it depends upon what we are going to discover. And really, the major factor of our life is science, rather than land, or water, or capital, or people. And all the attempts to learn from the past is in vain. Neither Adam Smith nor Karl Marx can teach us very much. They are totally irrelevant to what's going to happen. And as a result of science becoming the major factor, the old borders disappeared. We live in a global society. There is no more really national economies, only global economies. There is only national poverties. If you want to remain poor, you can do it as a nation. If you want to advance, you have to join in the global market. And the global market is a strange one. It's being affected by the people more than the people are being affected by them. For example, a good mood elevates economy. It has nothing to do with capital, nothing to do with wealth. You know, I saw when the Spanish football group won the match, immediately on the next day, all the Spaniards begin to buy. And the economy of Spain went up because of the victory of the football match. And who is the scientist who can tell us what will be the mood tomorrow morning? Unknown. And nobody can tell us what will a great scientist discover tomorrow. If you want to go to understand, try to understand the future of the economy, one shouldn't go to the banks or to the stock exchange. Go to the laboratories. See what is there. There is the economy of tomorrow. Nobody can control the scientist if economy is global, science is individual. And when a scientist goes through the customs, who can check what he has in his head, what may be in his head? And there is a competition. And when everybody is global, you know, it's hard to be a racist. It's hard to be national. You must have good public relations, goodwill. And today, actually the business are being run by the companies rather than by the governments. And the companies understand that they cannot sell just because they have a good product. They have to have also good relations. Because occasionally decisions are being made upon your relations rather than upon your products. As a matter of fact, most of them are beginning to give back money to the communities. Rich people in America and in Europe too wouldn't like to appear, they're educated persons, they wouldn't like to appear as profiteering from the poverty, from the poor people. You know, if they'll do it, they'll face a revolt. And they're trying very hard to pacify. Then the governments are also standing, in many ways, helpless, hopeless. The governments today, permit me to say, are afraid to govern. They want to be all the time popular. You cannot govern with popularity. You have to change. And the people say that the government is so anxious to be popular, they stop to trust them. Say, look, gentlemen, you're thinking about yourself, not about us. And the concept, Alexander, about leadership has changed. A leader today is not a man that stands on the top, but a man that goes ahead. If you want to be on the top, the bottom will not support you. On top of all those problems, we have another one. A young generation. Ladies and gentlemen, everybody's asking about the revolt in Egypt, in Tunisia, in other places. But look at your own homes. You have a revolt in your own family. Your young children do not want to follow you. They say, we love you, we respect you. But actually, what did you do to us? You left us a war full of wounds, of wars, of discrimination. We have the right to build our own future. We don't accept your assumptions, even not about democracy. If our flag of democracy was free expression, their flag of democracy is self-expression. He says, if I'm young, they'll give me a microphone, I shall go and make speeches. If I'm young and I have an inclination to become a musician, or an architect, or doctor, whatever you want, I want to go my way. I want to be connected with all people. Now the individual person today, the individual young man, does not need the government. He has an iPhone in his pocket, so he has the government in his pocket. He has all the information he wants it up to date, right away. And they can connect everybody. They don't want that their parents will be in the business. They want to speak differently, think differently, dress differently, occasionally for good reasons. For example, when I look at the T-shirts and the jeans as a dress, this is a declaration for democracy. Young people don't want that you will know if I'm rich or poor. They want equality. And now the two parts of the youth are in troubles. The ones who are coming from wealthy families and the others who are coming from poor surroundings. The youngsters who are coming from poverty clearly would like to have food, respect, future. It wasn't bad to be a poor man when there wasn't great communication. Because when you were in a poor country and you didn't have an internet or a Facebook, you thought the whole world is poor. So we are part of the poverty. But now when you have those eyes and those ears, the modern, and you look around, the young people begin to ask, why is there freedom and affluence? And here it is not. Now the problem of a wealthy young man and a poor young man is different. Because in a wealthy family, the number of children is small, restricted. But the investment in every child must be greater. In order for him to compete with modern age, you have to invest in him more in education, more in freedom. And he is becoming a mature person at a very early age. Today, a girl or a boy of the age of 14, they are better built physically, they are more informed intellectually, they don't like the stories about the past, they think you are trying to teach us irrelevant lessons. What is it important to know exactly in how many battles did Napoleon participate? We know he killed enough people, so we shall remember him. If you want details, press on the internet, they'll tell you exactly where they took place. Stop with it. We are more interested to compare and see the future. On the other hand, the poor youngsters who are coming from large families, they don't know how to escape poverty. They know that they cannot remain as they are. And in many of those countries where the poor youngsters are coming from, women are discriminated. If the women are discriminated, the children are discriminated. If the woman doesn't have a chance to be educated properly so she can educate her children, if the woman doesn't have a chance to become a constructive partner of the nation, the whole family is discriminated. And actually, it's a hopeless situation. You know, President Obama asked me, who is against, really, democracy in the Middle East? I told him the husbands. No husband wants to give equal right to his wife, and all the husbands don't want to give equal right to the women. If they won't do it, they can't escape poverty. Now the young generation lost respect as the governments are hesitant to govern. the young generation doesn't give credit to the governments. They are very suspicious. They say, you have your own personal agenda. Go ahead, we are not interested in you. We want straight service, whether we are poor to escape poverty, whether we are better off to have a better future. And that leads us to the revolution. Actually, the revolution is in every home. You know, when I meet with my children and grandchildren, to be frank, I learned that better for me to listen to them than them listening to me. They're better informed, they're up to date, they are not committed by prejudices and memory. There's a saying in English saying, seeing is believing. The fact is, believing is seeing. When you look with your eyes, you look with your prejudices. And every person sees the same thing with a different eye. And people are impressed by general impressions. They don't go into details. And it's very hard to create confidence in the future. For me, I mean, it's clear that we have to be fair and let the young generation having their own future. We shouldn't press upon them to follow us. Let us admit that we were not so great and complete and moral as we claim. And they connect with everybody, black and white, rich and poor, different nations. And they won't stop it. They won't ask your permission to do so. But they're also living in a world which lost its balance. The globe lost its balance. It's overpopulated, and it's hardly moving around today. There is a shortage of air, of water, of energy, of opportunities. And we are growing because in the poor countries, there are poor families with many children. You know, I'm looking around, for example, a country like Egypt. Egypt has grown 5 times in the last 50 years. Nothing grew in Egypt for 5 times. Neither the Nile, nor the industry, nor the tourism. Furthermore, along the Nile River, there are 9 countries, and each of them with a growing population. The Blue Nile begins at Ethiopia. Ethiopia is also a country of 80 million people. Egypt is 84 million people. And they're also hungry and poor, and they don't have food. So they say, you want to take my Blue Nile? Why? Because the British once promised you? You have the White Nile in Sudan. Sudan has also grown. It's another 60 million people. And I don't think that we can save those countries from poverty. Because it's an illusion to think that if you pump in money, the situation will really become normal and promising. You know, foreign aid has a problem. Foreign aid actually is taking money from poor people in rich countries and handing it over to rich people in poor countries. And you create a little bit of corruption. So money is not a solution. And once you use the money, you cannot reuse it. Finish. You cannot recycle money. The only way we have to think how to go out of poverty. And even if those countries will buy computers and Facebooks, it's not enough. Computers and Facebooks will not make them rich. It is a social change. Like, for example, giving women equal rights. Like, for example, stopping to lie. A dictator cannot exist if he cannot lie. And when you have those communication, it's very hard for the dictators to resist. So you see the dictators now fighting for their life, either with arms or by surrendering. They know it's the end, in a way, of dictatorship. So we have to ask ourselves what to do. And my answer is, the only reservoir we really have is in science. To run our world more scientifically and to add new science to the existing one. More scientifically, for example, when you take water. Water you can produce, you can save, you can recycle, you can find trees that drink less. I'm coming from a country that actually doesn't have land. Very small piece of land. Israel is a 15th size of Ukraine. Ukraine is 15 times larger than Israel. The piece of land we have is desert, refusing land, very difficult land. We don't have water either. We have a famous river, the Jordan River, but this river produces fame, not water. You cannot irrigate with it. It's not a river, really. We have two lakes, one dead, the other is dying. So we have no land and no water. What could we do? We went to science. Usually agriculture is an agreement between the Lord in heaven and the poor farmer. It's a very poor partnership because the farmer cannot hang on the Lord in heaven. Here he brings you a drought and here he brings you troubles. So we have a third partner, which is science. And our agriculture is high tech. We produce 10 times more than the average acre in the world. We use a third of the water. And you know, when you compare it to Russia, for example, Russia is 1,000 times the size of Israel in land. Russia has 25% of the sweet water in the world, 1,000 lakes of sweet water. And believe it or not, Israel is exporting carrots to Russia, and avocado to Paris, and flowers to London. Why I'm saying it, we are not supermen. We are like any other human being, but we really handle it scientifically. And by handling scientifically, you can save water, you can save energy, because we're also short of energy. And now we are facing another challenge. And here I want to say a word about the future. I believe that in the coming 10 years there will be a total revolution in science and industry. I feel that we are nearing the electronic age because of the cybernetics. We depend so much upon electronics that one can paralyze another country overnight with the hackers. We don't know how to defend ourselves. In a way, cybernetics are more dangerous than nuclear bombs, because to use a nuclear bomb is a sensation. But to paralyze a country or a company without knowing who did it, without leaving fingerprints, is a different story. And you see all over the places, countries and armies are trying to provide an answer what to do. And who will replace electronics? In my judgment, there is just one answer: the human brain. In my judgment, the greatest reservoir for the future is what is contained in this small box. Until now, we used our brain to discover other brains, to produce artificial brains. The brain of Google is better than our brain. We did it practically on all fields but one. We didn't investigate ourselves. We didn't use our brain to discover how does our brain function. It has whatever you want. It has electronics and this is chemistry and the computers, everything in this small box. You have 100,000 miles of connections, 1.5 billion point of nerves. And you know, we wake up in the morning, we don't know really what makes us happy, what makes us angry, what makes us extreme, what makes us moderate. We know it's within us, in our own body, in our head, but we don't have the slightest idea. How does it function? The reason is because the head is built of such delicate parts and technologies that all the instrumentation we have had are vulgar to enter the brain. And we can destroy the brain immediately. It's only now, with the nanometer, that we started to enter the brain. No, nanometer is the most tiny little instruments in the world. If you take out one hair from your head and you'll split it in 60,000 parts, this is the size of a nanometer. With the nanometer, we started to enter the brain. It's already sensational. It's clear that we can have an interface between the computer and the brain. Namely, we can take parts of the computer and put in our brains, and vice versa. Parts or technologies or strategies of our brain to put in the computer. It has an impact already. For example, we can put an electrode in our brain and overcome illness like Alzheimer and others. We can enter the brain without opening the body and handle directly tumors and others. And I think it began and it will grow very fast for 3 reasons. Reason number one, because the increase in artificial intelligence went up tremendously. The first computer was introduced 25 years ago. Its strength today is 1,000,000 times more. From the first computer they would hardly put in this room, you have today iPhone. And the difference is 1,000,000 times in effectiveness and cost. And it's spreading all the time. And the computer is now going into 2 directions. It is playing concerts, namely you can have several computers acting together, and it's playing solo. It can answer individual inclinations. The computer will learn who you are and give you an answer to your question that will fit your mentality. The second reason is the number of scientists in the world, with the Indians and the Chinese. The society of the community of scientists will go in millions. India is producing 400,000 engineers a year, so is China. And here quantity will become quality. But the third answer, we began and we see it's a great reservoir of alternatives. Everybody can be a better person. I just read a book that said actually a child is being born completely altruistic, without an ego. The ego begins to develop when he has to fight for his existence. It begins with the parents, the first fight a baby has. The parents like the baby, but they tell him how to sit and how to go, and the baby feels he loses freedom. So he begins to fight for himself, and it goes on, it goes up. And if we shall know what's happening to us, maybe we shall govern ourselves better. You know, when I think, when did civilization start? When we have had the first mirror. Before we had a mirror, we didn't shave, we didn't comb our hair, we didn't wash. We got a mirror. What can we do every morning? We have to be clean. We have to comb our hair. If we shall be able to build a mirror that will show not only our outside look, but our inside decision-making, I'm sure that many people will choose to be a better person. So I think we're at a revolutionary age. We're in a crisis because we lost the past and we didn't gain yet the future. If I can recommend to anybody, leave the past alone. Past is dead. Let him lie there quietly without our interference and references. The future is fresh and demanding. Let our children learn how to dream, how to envisage, how to have a vision. You know, most people prefer to remember rather than to think. When you say remember, you don't remember really. You remember the good things and you forget the bad things. So it's a discrimination. When you think, you don't know everything, but you're challenged. You can see a message. You can see a call and make the life of each of us and all of us better, meaningful, and satisfy at least the spirit of Shakespeare and the results of Chekhov. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Peres. That was magnificent. And I think all of us are different from your family in one respect, which is we would much rather listen to you than speak ourselves. I was also especially delighted by your reference to Chekhov, partly because I can't come to Yalta without thinking of Chekhov myself, and especially one of my favorite Chekhov stories, Dama s Sobachkой, but also because in your description of Chekhov, who at least his characters end sad but not yet dead, of course that also was an allusion to a very important theme for Ukrainians in the Ukrainian national anthem, which begins, "Ukraine is not yet dead." So it's a common idea for Ukrainians here. We have 10 minutes left, and I know I had lots of questions I wanted to ask you, but I think that's unfair because there are only 10 minutes. So I'm going to go straight to the hall. And my friend Strobe Talbot, who is the president of Brookings, a great diplomat, I still think of him mostly, though, as a terrific journalist, wanted to kick us off. So please, Strobe.
Thank you, Christian. And thank you, Mr. President, for an inspiring and wise speech. And I'd like to pick up, if I could, on the peroration of your speech and take you from the level of the general crisis you're talking about to a very real and immediate crisis that is a threat to the stability, if not the peace, of this region. And I'm referring to the crisis in relations between your country and Turkey, which of course is also exacerbating the relationship between both your country and Turkey and Egypt, which you referred to several times. You look a little weary when I pose the question. I can at least promise you that it'll be easier to discuss it here in the Yalta Forum than it was at a certain forum in Switzerland not too long ago. But looking to the future, what do you think it would require to have a Chekhovian ending to this crisis rather than a Shakespearean ending?
Thank you very much.
Well, to answer a difficult question, one must be careful not to make it more difficult. So I can't answer as freely as I would like. The basic issue is, where is Mr. Erdogan going? Is he going to the secular or the religious way? I think right now he would like to combine the two of them. And this foreign minister has a great idea of zero problems, which is not bad. But it's difficult, because if you have to solve the problems of others, you can behave like it's a zero problem. But when you have to solve the problems of yourself, the zero is a problem. When it comes, say, to Cyprus or to the Kurds or these sort of things. Anyway, Turkey is a country with a difference when I compare it to other Muslim countries. And I respect the difference. And I'm not going into personalities. I think we have to work out quietly a solution, because the crisis is both psychological and ideological in a way, but not a lost case. And I think we have to let the temper go down a little bit and quietly come again together. There is no conflict between Turkey and Israel. No reason for a conflict. Israel doesn't have any ambitions. Turkey has a history, they have their own ambitions, but that's their matter. And I hope so in the coming future, when the voices will tone down, then Chekhov will come alive.
Thank you very much. And this might seem unfair privilege for Brookings, but Martin Indyk is such an expert in all of these matters. I'd love to hear his question.
Thank you very much, President Perez. One cannot be anything but amazed and impressed by your recounting of the incredible things that Israel has done with its brain power. And yet it has an albatross around its neck called the Palestinian problem. You, with your brain, came up with the solution back in 1993, 2 states for 2 people, the Oslo framework, which was your doing. But here we are in 2011, and the peace seems further away than ever. So I wonder if you would give us the benefit of your brain power when it comes to how to solve, finally, this problem.
Still in the research of the brain. We didn't complete yet the research, so we cannot use it completely, but let me say the following. The only open window right now for to negotiate is between us and the Palestinians. The other windows are shattering. I shall say a word about the uprising. The uprising was done by the young generation. There are 300 million Arabs in the Middle East. 100 millions are young people from the age of 16 to the age of 29. They are better educated, and they have a better idea what's happening. So they know what they want, they don't know how to do it. And there is a hidden competition in the Arab way, whether to have an internal domestic revolution or destruction, or the old hands, the more extreme and religious, to have a negative flag. The best is Israel. It's either anti-Israel or pro-the Middle East, in my judgment. And if I can use the communist expression about religion, Israel for them is like opium for the masses. Say anti-Israel and you solve the problem. The Palestinians belong, in my judgment, to the more settled part. Though we're in conflict, we are also in friendship. We came to learn each other. The pragmatic distance or gap is shorter than the psychological one. And you know, when you negotiate, your real problem is your own people to start with. Because when you negotiate, you have to make compromises. So your people are asking you, why are you compromising so much? You don't know how to negotiate. You give away, you trust too much. You don't have good answers for it. And that's what the two sides are doing, to appear as being tough and strong, at the same time to make compromises. For that reason, I think that peace must be done quietly. Peace is like love. Unless you close your eyes, you cannot fall in love and you cannot make peace. When you see the naked picture. Now there was the interference of the United Nations. All of a sudden, instead of solving the problem of the peace between us and the Palestinians, which is quite near, we have to solve the problem of the United Nations, how to behave there. Because the United Nations is not divided pro or against peace or Israel or Palestine. There is a majority against Israel. Israel doesn't have it. And now the United States, the Europeans, and others are looking how to go out of the United Nations. Because what the United Nations can produce is a declaration. The United Nations cannot answer on the two real questions: how to provide real independence to the Palestinians and how to provide real security to Israel. having just one of them is just like walking on one leg or clapping with one hand. If Israel won't have security, how can you have peace? If the Palestinians won't have independence, how can you have peace? So right now we are trying to go out of a problem that we have created. I think, by the way, the uprise will not win in the first jump. I think the people that will be elected will come from the existing forces, say the army, the Muslim brothers. But once they'll come to power and they won't answer the real problems, which is poverty, unemployment, the young people will continue to revolt. So I see two stages right now in the Arab world. One will be taken over by the existing powers, and the other, the next stage, again the young people will revolt. The people who went out of poverty, China and India, or South Korea if you want, they did it on their own. They didn't do it with foreign money. They did it with a restructuring of their society. By the way, each of them having, you know, everybody has two revolutions in order to have one. The French Revolution started probably with Victor, Hugo, and Voltaire, but then came Robespierre and took it out from them. The Great Revolution in Russia started with Tolstoy, then came in Lenin, took it out of them. In China, you have also two revolutions. One done by Mao Zedong, who united the Chinese, gave them a message, and he was a great leader until he became one. When he became a leader, he started with the revolution and things went astray. So came Deng, who was down to earth and did the job. And the same is in India, can go on like it. So here too, there will be two revolutions in my judgment. The first will be by the existing forces who are organized, and the youth, which is together, enthusiastic, but doesn't have an organization. Even a revolution needs an administration, you know. You cannot have a revolution without administration, without ideology. So we shall have to negotiate this transitional period, cool, but we have to do whatever we can to bring us and the Palestinians, in the meantime, as an open window together. I personally think that the present Palestinian leadership, Abu Mazen and Fayyad, are the best we can have. And I think they really want peace. I think they're also facing, like each of us, their own public opinion. So right now, I hope the United Nations will not take upon itself things that she cannot implement. They will let us out and let us alone, and let us try to make the last step in order to achieve a solution based on the two states, a Palestinian state and the Israeli state, living together and living democratically and living in a modern way. May I say here at a foreign audience that I believe that maybe the Palestinians can become the first democratic society in the whole region. They are very close. They had elections, and they're also watching us, what we are doing. Zohan Arafat told me, he says, democracy, my God, who has invented it? It is so tiring. Like Chekhov, let's be tired and democratic and not, you know, declarative and empty.
Okay, let's be tired and democratic. I think that could also be a motto for Ukraine. We have time just for one more question. So quickly, who would like to ask it? Going once, going twice, please.
Shalom, Boker Tov. I'm Alexei Garany from Kyiv Mohyla Academy, and I have a question. Actually, it's follow-up. The question of Israeli security. Israel has made a lot of compromises and concessions, but it seems that even some moderate Arabs, they still demand from Israel to refuse the Jewishness of the Israeli state, to refuse the Jewish character of the Israeli state. And the question is, you're making the compromises, but you do not receive the answer to the deep problem of Israeli security. And this is also important concern for Ukraine, because we made a lot of concessions to our great northern neighbor, but unfortunately the pressure is mounted on Ukraine. So what's your approach regarding concessions and possibility of compromise? Thank you.
I think we can find a bridge about this issue. So basically, independence is self-determination. You don't decide how to call your partner, but each of us decide how to call ourselves. And if Israel will decide that we are a Jewish state, they will sign. No problem. So I think here is a linguistic opportunity. I don't think that this is such a real problem. There is clearly suspicion, which is normal. But again and again, I don't think that security can go without peace forever. You know, there are limits to power. What can you do with power? Even if you have the greatest power on earth, you cannot make a full person wise, for example. If you have the greatest power on earth, you cannot make an extreme person moderate. So we have to understand the limits of power too, what can and cannot be achieved. In that case, I believe that a combination of a wealth of definitions and also a little bit of ambiguity at the first stage can enable us to open the negotiations. That's my view.
Thank you very, very much, President Peres. Thank you very much, President Yanukovych. I think we have to leave it there. We've run slightly over. So maybe everyone could join me in thanking the presidents for some fabulous remarks.